So, we often think of creative genius as like this straightforward march to brilliance.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the reality, when you start digging, it's usually a much more tangled and honestly fascinating story.
Definitely. The personal lives, the desires,
Yeah.
it all gets mixed up with the work itself.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack one such story today with a deep dive into the world of Cole Porter. We're focusing specifically on a really crucial early period.
Ah, Cole Porter. Just the name brings up this image, doesn't it? High society, those like legendary parties,
Mm-hmm.
and lyrics that were just so sharp, so witty. There's that. Je ne sais quoi.
That's the perfect phrase for it, that sophistication, that charm. It just surrounds him.
It really does.
And today we're going deep into one specific piece, Chapter 3 of a dissertation about Porter. So think of this as your direct line to understanding a really pivotal moment for him, a snapshot when things were really starting to take off.
Right. Chapter 3 is titled, You Do Something to Me, Pursuit of Pleasure. And that title, it's pretty revealing, isn't it?
It tells you straight up.
Yeah, it tells us we're not just looking at the songs in isolation. We're
Yeah.
exploring how Porter's, well, his personal life, his evolving tastes maybe, and his art started to really connect and feed each other during this time.
We're talking roughly the late 1920s. Porter's kind of on the cusp, really breaking through on Broadway in a big way.
And the influence of his social circles, which were pretty unique, that starts becoming really clear in the songs.
And for you, our listener, you shared this dissertation with us, so our goal here is to really pull out the key stuff from this chapter.
Yeah, we want to give you a solid grasp of this period without, getting bogged down in all the academic jargon. Consider this your streamlined path to getting the inside scoop on this bit of Porter's story.
All right, so Chapter 3, Pursuit of Pleasure. It really kicks off by looking at Porter's first big successes on Broadway.
Right.
And the first major one it singles out is the musical Paris from 1928.
And the song from Paris that everyone remembers, the one that really put him on the commercial map,
Yep.
was Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love. And it's interesting, he was 37 when that happened, so not exactly an overnight success story.
37. Wow. Okay, let's do it. Seems like such a simple title, doesn't it?
Deceptively simple.
But the lyrics. Okay, this is where it gets really Porter, I think. It's like this playful list almost. A world tour of, well,
Of everyone and everything getting it on, basically.
basically birds, bees.
What's so clever is that list format.
Yeah.
It's not just random stuff. It builds this feeling of like a universal urge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But presented with such lightness and wit. Birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. I mean, who thinks of educated fleas?
It's brilliant. Was that kind of catalog-style lyric common then, or was he really doing something new here?
Well, there were novelty songs, sure. But Porter's level of sophistication, the sheer, breadth of the examples he uses,
Yeah.
that felt pretty fresh.
And the travelogue aspect. Spain, Siam, Amsterdam.
Yeah.
It's like a very cheeky guided tour.
Exactly. And the humor is so dry, people say in Boston, even beans do it. You just have a smile at
You
that.
do.
Oh,
And
yeah.
under the surface humor, there's that layer of innuendo, right? Those double meanings that became his trademark.
Oh, definitely. Like the line about mothballs. Moths in your rugs do it. What's the use of mothballs? It's funny. But it's also hinting at, the futility of resisting natural urges
Mm.
and just repeating, let's do it, over and over.
Mm.
It gets more insistent, more passionate, but always with that little wink.
The chapter mentions Irene Bordoni, the star of Paris. Apparently her delivery was key. Crisp and pointed, making the puns land just right.
Yeah, that's crucial. Yeah, shows he wasn't just writing words on a page. He was thinking about performance, how it would sound, how it would play.
Right.
And the dissertation even mentions Noel Coward's famous parody of the song.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which kind of highlights the song's impact, but also that, playful rivalry between those two.
Yeah.
They were definitely on the same wavelength, comedically.
Okay, so Paris hits, Let's Do It, is a huge sensation. Where does Chapter 3 take us next in this pursuit of pleasure?
The next stop is 50 Million Frenchmen, which came out in 1929.
Okay.
And this was a much bigger deal for Porter. A really ambitious show. His most extensive score up to that point, 20 songs.
20 songs. Wow. That's a lot for one show back then.
It really is.
And the dissertation says these songs weren't just like dropped in, they were actually integrated into the plot. That feels like a step up, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It shows him getting more confident, really wanting to weave the music into the story itself.
Makes sense.
And this show produced another massive hit for him, You Do Something to Me.
Ah, yes, You Do Something to Me. Even the title. It has that feeling of being captivated almost under a spell. What does the chapter say about those lyrics?
Well, what's really interesting is the contrast. The language is actually very direct,
Mm-hmm.
very simple in places, but it's describing this almost magical effect. Words like hypnotize, power, spell, even voodoo. It creates this feeling of being completely overwhelmed by someone.
You do something to me, something that simply mystifies me. It's so plain, yet it carries so much weight.
Exactly. And the chapter points to the music too, that descending melody line and the kind of persistent rhythm.
Yeah.
It really does contribute to that feeling of a trance, almost like you're being pulled downwards, hypnotized.
Right, like it's drawing you in. Is that sort of the typical emotional effect of a descending line in music?
Often, yeah. It
Yeah.
can suggest falling, yielding, or like here, maybe being irresistibly drawn towards something or someone. It really backs up that under a spell idea.
And he does that clever thing with the words too, repeating do and that.
Do that voodoo that you do so well.
Yeah.
It's playful, but it also emphasizes that feeling of being, bewitched.
The chapter also mentions a song that got cut from 50 Million Frenchmen, a toast to Volstead.
Ah, yes, the Volstead Act that was the act that brought in Prohibition.
Right, so the song was making fun of it.
Apparently so, satirizing the whole thing. But, Prohibition was still very much in force.
So, probably too risky.
Highly likely, yeah. Probably pulled to avoid controversy or trouble with censors. It's a little reminder that even for someone like Porter, there were still lines you had to be careful about crossing.
And the show itself, 50 Million Frenchmen, it got mixed reviews.
It did, yeah. Some critics thought Porter's uh, lightheartedness, his focus on glamour and fun, was maybe a bit unseemly, given the start of the Depression.
Tone deaf, maybe?
Kind of. But then you had people like Irving Berlin.
Hmm.
I mean, a legend, loving it, praising it really highly. So quite a split.
What was the specific criticism about his attitude, though? Was it just the timing or something else?
Mostly the timing, it seems. The feeling was that this kind of lavish escapism, while maybe fine before, felt a bit jarring as economic hardship was really starting to bite. But others, like Berlin, clearly saw the quality, the craft. Maybe they felt people needed that kind of diversion precisely because times were tough. It shows how context shapes reception, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered these early shows, the big songs. Then chapter 3 seems to zoom out a bit, linking this more directly to the pursuit of pleasure in Porter's actual life.
Exactly. And brings in some key figures. Elsa Maxwell, for instance.
Right, the famous party giver.
Legendary. A major socialite, knew absolutely everyone. She becomes a really important figure in Porter's world.
And the chapter mentions their friendship was kind of unusual for the time, Maxwell being lesbian, quite masculine, Porter being effeminate, homosexual.
Yeah, but they seem to find common ground in that post-war Paris social scene. Both kind of outsiders in a way, yet right at the center of things.
How did that kind of friendship, those unconventional dynamics, specifically feed into his work, do you think, beyond just being influential?
Well, I think seeing how people like Maxwell navigated that world, how they performed social roles while maybe not fitting the standard molds, it probably gave Porter a sharper eye for the nuances, the complexities of relationships and desire.
The performative aspect of it all.
Exactly. And maybe that shared sense of being slightly outside the norm allowed for a certain kind of honesty, or at least a shared understanding that then subtly informed his lyrics.
And then there's Linda, his wife. Chapter 3 talks about their relationship. She knew about his homosexuality, but insisted on discretion.
That's the picture it paints. A marriage based more on companionship, mutual social benefits perhaps, than traditional romance.
Right.
Linda gave him social standing, a veneer of normalcy maybe, and he gave her this life of, well, excitement, travel, constant entertainment.
The chapter actually calls it an antidote for Cole to avoid ennui, that feeling of boredom.
Yeah, the deep boredom that seemed to plague him sometimes. So this lifestyle, the travel, the parties, the constant stimulation, it was almost necessary for him.
So the pursuit of pleasure wasn't just a theme in his songs, it was fundamental to his way of life.
Absolutely. His life was the source material, in a way. Those elite circles, the conversations, the behavior he observed it, all went into the hopper, filtered through his whip, and came out as these incredibly sophisticated songs.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to his actual composing style during this time. Chapter 3 mentions his method fitting lyrics to melody.
Yeah, it talks about how he'd often start with a title or just an idea and then meticulously build outwards, crafting both the words and music together. He was known for being a real craftsman.
And his preference for one-syllable words and open vowel sounds, why was that important?
Well, mostly for the singers. One-syllable words are just easier to articulate clearly,
Makes sense.
and open vowels like ah or oh, they sing better, more resonant. Plus, the chapter notes it made finding rhymes easier for him. He apparently kept long lists of rhyming words.
Smart. Chapter 3 also brings up Sheila Davis's point about repeating the title in the lyrics, using "you do something to me" as the example.
Right. It's almost like basic marketing, isn't it?
Get the hook in.
Exactly. Repeat the title often enough, make it catchy, and it sticks to people's heads.
Yep.
It helps make the song a hit. Porter was an artist, but he understood the business too.
And structurally, the chapter mentions the classic Tin Pan Alley AABA structure. Could you just quickly unpack that for listeners who might not know it? Why was that so common?
Sure. AABA is basically verse A, repeat the verse A, then a different section called the bridge B, and then back to the verse A one last time, maybe with a little twist.
Okay.
It was super popular because it's satisfying. You get the repetition, which makes it memorable, but the B section provides contrast, keeps it interesting. It's a really solid, pleasing structure.
Got it. And finally, the chapter makes this interesting contrast between Porter's background, wealthy, privileged.
Born with a silver spoon,
Yeah.
basically.
Right. Compared to many other big songwriters of the day who were often immigrants really driven to succeed. How did that difference maybe show up in the work itself, beyond just like detachment?
That's a great point the chapter raises. Because Porter had that financial security, that social standing, he wasn't necessarily writing from a place of striving or, deep yearning in the same way some others might have been.
Mm-hmm.
It perhaps allowed him to be more of an observer, maybe a bit more cynical or world-weary in his takes on love and life. His perspective was shaped by that very specific, very elite world he lived in. It gave his songs that unique blend of sophistication and sometimes a cool detachment.
Okay, so we've really dug into chapter 3 here. We've looked at those early Broadway hits, the whole pursuit of pleasure idea in his life and lyrics and his style. What are the main things we should take away?
I think the biggest thing is that clear, strong link the chapter draws between Porter's personal life, that relentless search for pleasure and stimulation, and his creative explosion on Broadway.
Right.
Songs like Let's Do It weren't just witty. They reflected something changing in society, and they came directly from his world. And You Do Something to Me showed his mastery of melody and mood.
And it's so clear how his unique background, the wealth, the social scene, even the unconventional aspects of his personal life really shaped his voice.
Absolutely. He wasn't just writing about that glamorous world. He was in it. That gave him this incredibly distinctive perspective, this specific flavor that he translated so brilliantly into his music and lyrics.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, as you keep exploring Cole Porter's music. Consider this. How often does that personal pursuit of pleasure, whether it's in art or life or relationships, actually fuel creativity? And how does knowing more about an artist's life, all its sort of twists and turns and contradictions, change how you hear their work?
That's a great question to ponder. Does it deepen your appreciation? Does it make it more complex?
Definitely something to think about as you maybe listen to some of these songs again or explore more of his amazing catalog.